Have you ever wondered why a God of love would allow so much destruction? And more intriguing, why would he harden a man's heart rather than convince him with mercy? The story of Egypt's 10 plagues has been told for millennia, but we rarely talk about the deepest spiritual background: free will, the conflict between gods, and the true purpose behind the miracles of Exodus. Moses was not just a liberator, he was the voice of Yahweh, the God of Israel, in the midst of a divine confrontation with the mighty Egyptian pantheon. Each plague, far from being random, was like a direct blow to an Egyptian deity, dismantling its symbols of power one by one. What seemed like an army of pests was, in fact, a practical class of spiritual theology with Pharaoh as a reluctant student. But what if all this is not just about punishment? What if it is about showing, through the hardening of the heart, that God respects even human stubbornness to reveal something greater about his righteousness? What is behind these pests can completely transform the way you understand God, human choices, and even what we call destination. Get ready. This is not just another biblical story. It is a spiritual key that few dare to turn. From the beginning, the confrontation between Moses and Pharaoh was much more than a political fight. It was a true spiritual duel among the God of Israel, Yahweh, and the whole religious system of Egypt. Each of Egypt's 10 pests was like a slap in the face of an Egyptian deity. And look that they were not few gods, they had God for everything, from the Nile to heaven. But instead of a war with swords, God raised an army of pests. Does it look exaggeration? In fact, it was strategy. He was showing that none of the so-called gods from there had real power. It was as if to say, do you trust the Nile? So see what happens when I play in it. And so, symbol by symbol, idol by idol, each deity was being placed in its place. Moses' mission begins with a detail that no one forgets: a bush on fire, but not consumed. There, at that strange and sacred moment, Yahweh calls Moses and sends him to the boldest mission anyone could receive, face to face, and demand the liberation of the Israelites. Now think to me, would you accept such a mission after years exiled as sheep pastor? For it is, not Moses felt prepared, but God chose him precisely for that. From there, a breathtaking clash begins, where divine authority imposes itself on the pride of the most powerful man of the time. But Pharaoh doesn't give an easy no. With each plague, your heart becomes harder. But was it just stubbornness? Or was there anything bigger at stake? The first plague was not chosen by chance. Yahweh went straight into the heart of Egypt, the Nile River. This water was considered sacred, source of life, prosperity, and fertility, practically a liquid god, personified by Hapi. But when Moses touches the river with his staff, everything changes. That life flow becomes blood. Dead fish floating, bad smell everywhere. It was a chaos, and more than that, a direct affront to the idea that Hapi protected the people. It was as if God said, let's see if your God can clean it. Even Pharaoh's wizards tried to reproduce the feat, but the damage was already done. Egypt saw, right away, that it was not just tricks. It was the beginning of a deep spiritual conflict, and the stage was armed. If you think frogs are just noisy and sticky, imagine millions of them jumping everywhere in bed, food, clothes. This is what happened when Yahweh sent the second plague against Egypt. This time, the target was Heqet, the goddess of frogs and fertility, represented with frog's head. What was once a symbol of blessing became a curse. Even Pharaoh, annoyed by the invasion, asked Moses to intercede with God to end it. And here comes the curious detail: Moses let Pharaoh choose the day for the plague to cease. Why? To show that the control was totally in the hands of Yahweh. Pharaoh accepts. The plague passes, but his heart continues hardened. You can see that the problem was deeper than only jumping frogs. The third plague came from the floor, literally. Moses hit his staff on the earth's dust, and out of nowhere, swarms of lice or mosquitoes, depending on translation, emerged. What matters is that there were so many, but so many, that no one could escape. And what Egyptian god was being challenged now? Geb, the god of the earth. What they stepped on with reverence, which represented stability, became a source of torment. Here, something impressive happens. Egypt's own wizards try to replicate the miracle and fail. They throw the towel and admit, this is God's finger. Even so, Pharaoh closes his heart again. Do you notice? Even with the truth rubbed in the face, he chooses to ignore. And then we start to enter the delicate question of free will. Imagine Egypt covered by flies. Not one or two, but millions, invading houses, covering people, spreading disease. The fourth plague came as a real sugar airstrike, and with a very clear message. Yahweh had even power over the smallest living beings. This time, the target was Khepri, the god of creation and rebirth, often represented by a sacred scarab, a kind of beetle. But the god of life was humiliated with insects that brought death and rot only. And there is a detail that you can't ignore. It while the whole Egypt was taken by flies, the land of Gozan, where the Israelites lived, remained intact. It was as if God said, "Here I protect mine." But even in the face of this supernatural division, the heart of Pharaoh continued as a stone. This plague was a straight blow to Egypt's pocket and pride. Suddenly, all cattle, oxen, cows, sheep, camels fell dead in the fields. It was as if the strength of the economy collapsed before everyone's eyes. And who was challenged here? Hathor, the goddess with cow-headed, symbol of love, protection, and fertility. She was worshipped as the one who brought life to the people. But at that moment she could not protect or the flocks that bearing her name. The most shocking? No Israelites' animals have been affected. Zero. No loss. This showed, in a wide open way, that Yahweh not only had control over life, but also knew how to protect his in the midst of chaos. Even so, guess what? Pharaoh was still firm in his pride, as if nothing had happened. If so far Pharaoh still thought he could have a way with his wizards, this plague showed that there was no more space for tricks. Moses took a handful of ashes and threw it into the sky, and suddenly, open and painful wounds began to emerge in the skin of the Egyptians. Bubbles, pustules, a suffering that reached even the priests and wizards, which were considered guardians of healing and knowledge. The irony? This plague was a direct challenge to goddess Isis, a symbol of health, healing, and medicine. But Isis was silent. And the wizards? Nor could they stand before Moses, such the pain. It was as if God are saying, "Not even those who supposedly heal escape my judgment." And even with the body in flames of pain, Pharaoh's heart was still frozen. And when you think you've seen everything, a storm comes like never before. Hail falling from the sky mixed with fire, a scene that challenges even the logic of nature. It was Yahweh showing his authority over the heavens. The plague was a direct affront to the goddess Nut, which the Egyptians believed to be heaven in themselves, the protector of heaven. But right now, she could not prevent destruction from falling on plantations, houses, trees, and even people. And again, as a divine pattern, only the land of the Israelites was unharmed. Imagine the despair. Look to the neighbor and see that everything is normal, while on your side, everything falls apart. But Pharaoh? He even promised that he would let the people go. Only then came back. And what seemed regret, in fact, was just passing fear. If there was still something left in Egypt, this plague tried to devour. A cloud of grasshoppers so dense that he darkened the sky arrived like a voracious army, eating everything that was left from the harvests. Trees, plantations, leaves, nothing escaped. And guess who was the target this time? Set, the god of chaos and storms. Irony of the great, the Lord of chaos itself was swallowed by true chaos, sent by the God of Israel. Even Pharaoh's officers begged him to give in, saying, "Egypt is destroyed." But obstinacy was already part of the scenario. Pharaoh even asked Moses forgiveness, but just to try to put out the fire. As soon as the locusts disappeared, hardened again. It is as if God is exposing not only the idols of Egypt, but also the illusion of false surrender. For 3 full days, Egypt was swallowed by a dark darkness that no one could see a hand ahead. It was not just the absence of light, it was a darkness that felt in the skin, a heavy silence, a spiritual terror hovering in the air. This plague was a direct attack on Ra, the sun god, the supreme deity of the Egyptian pantheon. For them, Ra was a source of life, order, and power. Then imagine the thud, the greatest of the gods erased completely, while in the homes of the Israelites there was light. This was not just a miracle, it was a public humiliation. But Pharaoh, instead of recognizing Yahweh's sovereignty, tried to negotiate. They can go, but leave the flocks. That is, I still wanted to keep control. And once again, the hardened heart refused to give in, as if stuck in even greater inner darkness. Now comes the most controversial part, and perhaps the deepest. Why did God harden Pharaoh's heart after all? Didn't he have a choice? The Bible shows that, at times, Pharaoh himself hardens his heart on his own. But in others, it is God who does it. This raises an issue that goes through centuries. How far does our free will go when God is in action? The hardening of Pharaoh's heart was not just punishment, it was part of a larger plan, to show the world that Yahweh is not one among many gods. He is the only one, and for that, he turned the stubbornness of a king into the stage of miracles, signs, and judgment. Deep down, it was as if Pharaoh had a chance to change. But he chose not to hear. And yet God used it as an eternal lesson on power, justice, and human choices. The story of Egypt's 10 plagues is not just about liberation, it is about revelation. Revelation of a God who does not bow before empires, who turns signs into messages, and even stubbornness into purpose. Pharaoh's hardened heart raises a question that crosses the centuries. How often do we also resist the voice of God, even when everything around us screams for change? And you? Have you noticed any area of your life where, like Pharaoh, have tried to keep control at all costs? Is what seems punishment is actually a divine invitation to transformation? Perhaps today is the day to look at your personal pest's moments of crisis, pain, loss not as punishment, but as opportunities to listen to deeper. If this reflection has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and share this video with someone who also needs to rethink their choices and discover the true meaning of free will in the light of faith.